My apologies. It looks like the stream died? Okay, well, I don't know what happened there. I have no clue whatsoever. Let's get some music going again. And hopefully, that was bizarre. But we're going to continue. Sorry guys, don't know what happened there. I'll investigate in the future. If it starts happening regularly, I'm really going to have to look into other ways to stream. I'm using OBS right now, but you know, if it comes down to it, I might have to hunt down a kind of different thing. Don't know. Whatever. Alright, so we're not finding what we're hunting for, and that's somewhat frightening. Why is the model not showing our extra node? Because the world clearly shows our 2 nodes are here. So the question is, why doesn't our for loop, and this might actually explain why this isn't working. So here's our generic model, and I might actually have to subnode into it. Because you see, we hit up here in the top of the for loop again, and then immediately exit. So I'm going to guess that I shouldn't be getting this. I should get the first subnode, and then kind of call get next node through there to find what I'm hunting for. Let's try this again. So we get the first subnode, and it's immediately null. Really? Really, really? Cannot catch a break. Alright, let's go the other direction. We're gonna get the first supernode. Or actually, just not first supernode, just the supernode. We'll see if this has a better idea of what's going on. Ah, and there is no supernode because we haven't actually added this to the system yet. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. So because it's not added or existing to the world right now, it's having some trouble finding what we want. Let's see if we can kind of find what we're looking for after we've added it to the world. So we're going to go back to that old method we had before. Shed blueprint model find node by the name footprint. Let's see if this works. Because once again, we're kind of poking around. Sometimes his structures don't do what you expect them to do, which is really unfortunate for a game engine. I might have to swap to XSplit if this continues to give me trouble. We'll see. Okay, so the engage should have... Ah, okay, here it is. So this worked this time. And I can't really show you guys because IntelliSense, blah, 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 blah. But it's here. The footprint geometry is a valid node. Our plate size is now a valid size. And the footprint position is coming back good. So I'm just going to quickly step through. I don't actually remember if we did... Okay, that was a valid one. Okay, so this is a valid setup. The code does work as far as we can tell. So now let's do a very clearly invalid test, right? Let's put this, like, on this cliff, and it shouldn't work. And it didn't, actually. Look at that. That's cool. So now, each time I click, and it breaks an edge somewhere... Oh. Okay. Maybe it doesn't completely work. It looks like it mostly works. That's really unfortunate. It looks like it's working in most cases. Let's see. Let's try a couple other test cases. So here it clearly isn't working. But there it clearly did. So something's going wrong here. So that's valid. This is invalid. But for some reason this, no. This is still valid. Bizarre. That is incredibly bizarre. I wonder if there's some kind of translation or maybe rotation that I'm doing incorrectly. Let's look at this a little again in a little more detail before we kind of file this as a bug and set it aside, because honestly the feature works, or it should work, right? But okay, so here's our footprint position. That looks like a perfectly valid X and Y. Oh no, that's not a valid X and Y. Or is it? I have to keep looking at this and wondering what the heck is going on here. This looks like the same exact number, so let's see, I'll put this here. Footprint position, and I'll just open up this vector so you can see that, okay, minus 0.45 and 1.5. Let's make sure I'm not going completely nuts. Okay, so there's one attempt and failure. Now I'm going to move somewhere else and click here. Okay, and that footprint terrain cell is very different. Yeah, these numbers are very different. Okay, I must have just clicked in a bizarre spot. So let's check our corners here. So here's corner X and here's corner Y. And let's just make sure that these look good. So every single time we want to just double check. So the footprint position, okay, looks good. So does our corner. And now we go up in the X direction, and that looks fine. Then we're going to go back and down. What happened there? Okay, loaded a new world. We click, we set it down. So our position, okay, so if here's our center point, you can see that the corner X is back and up. That's good. And then it goes across. That's fine. So there's a problem. It's only checking 2 points, it looks like. We're not actually generating a whole set of 4 for some reason. Oh, because we broke on an invalid case. Let's try a valid case. Because I keep putting these in bad spots. Okay, here's a fully valid tile, right? This should be fine. So, okay, one corner looks good, second corner looks good, third corner looks good, fourth corner looks good. So the corners look fine. So it's probably some of my math somewhere here is unhappy. Because doing this should not work, right? I'm going to remove that breakpoint. That doesn't work. Neither does that. Nor that. Okay. So it's not working like 90, or I should say it is working like 90% of the time. You just have these cases here where it actually isn't quite correct. Thank you, Bardock. The haircut was not so nice when I first got it. When I first got it, it looked like a Beatles-style bowl cut, and I actually had to wet down and recut my own hair to fix it up because it was just, oh, it was a nightmare. I looked like a small child after the barber was done, which is what I get for visiting a new barber. The problem is I moved somewhat recently, so going to my old barber would mean driving for the better part of, an hour probably, and I'd rather not do that. So I'm trying to find a new one, but of course, finding a barber who does styles that you like and not just freaking bowl cuts is difficult. So we'll see. We shall see how it goes. How do we double check that these values are right in the game world? That is the question. And I think what I'm going to do is I have, hiding somewhere, there's like a debug sphere. or I thought there was some kind of like debug sphere functionality that I could make use of. And I thought that lived, here it is, add sphere. So these are things that A, should not be in a world editor or a world generator. These should be things that live at least inside the utility function. So let's put them in here. Oh, that's the wrong utility function though. That is the geometry utilities. We want the game utilities. I break things up into all kinds of places just to kind of ensure that everything lands where it should. So we're also going to go into our world generator and rip out all these, yeah, here's all these debug functions. We don't want these out here. That's a really bad place for those. Unfortunately, monitoring all the code written by my partner is difficult. And also, he usually does good work. It's just every once in a while things get put in places that they either don't belong or they might belong there just fine. I just kind of don't want them there personally because of personal stylistic choices. It's not the end of the world, I just have to do a little cleanup. We also have to swap the namespace. These are no longer in a world generator class, they are in the game utils subclass. So I could check if the height is the same at all four corners, but the height that I'm using, so that there's two problems with that. One is if I have two cells that have perfectly identical height, that would create times when I might not, actually that might not be a bad idea now that I think about it. The problem is checking the cell is usually going to be the best way I can do this. I might actually want to check the world height when I'm done with this. That'll be a good next step, right? But for now, if we're still getting that even we are on the same cell when we are technically not on the same cell, then we need to find out why and fix that first before we can simply just check height. Because we don't want to do kind of slow ray casts straight down. Those can cause their own kinds of problems. So I'm adding this debug code in here, essentially so that we can see exactly where these problems are existing. Bam. That looks good. Does that compile? No, it's complaining about something somewhere. Do either of these files know about the world? No, this one does not. There's our problem, and we actually don't need... So if you have an include in a header file, you definitely don't need that same include sitting inside the CPP file. It's completely redundant and does nothing but slow down your compilation times. Okay, so we've got this add sphere, and now that we've ripped it out of the bad place and we're putting it into, or we've moved it into the tools where we want it. Oh, come on. Come on, fingers. Type things. I need you to type things so that I can use them. So what we're going to do is something a little crazy, but we'll clean it up later. We are going to grab our game world, and every time we generate a corner, we're going to add a sphere to that corner. So we're going to pass along our world pointer. We are going to pass in a point 3D. And this point 3D is going to be made up of our corner X, our corner Y, and our corner cell. We're going to just get the elevation. So there's our X, Y, Z. And we want size, finally. Let's try... I don't actually know. Let's try 0.5. Maybe that'll work. Why is it complaining? Must be a class or namespace. It is a namespace. called game utils. Did I miss something? Oh, whoops. Game utils, not game tools. Oh, also, I added geometry utils, not game utils, like I expected to. Whoops. But it turns out I also need the geometry utils. Whoops. Okay, is that it? Are we good? Everything's... yeah, we're good? Okay. Makes me kind of wonder if I didn't include that no? Okay, it's fine. Whatever. So let's try it. This should give us spheres in the game world that tell us where we're checking. Ah, those are huge. Oops. Let's fix that. Those 0.5 is clearly cojones too large. Let's break that down to like, oh god, even, let's try 0.05, right? Make them 10 times smaller. Because that was a little too much. Okay, so already you can see a problem, right? Every time I click, not only is it only putting down some of these spheres. Oh, I know why it's only putting down some, but look at that. The spheres are offset, and they're kind of in the wrong direction. It's not right. We gotta fix that. This is why we're getting bad results. Yes, I'm going to have a puffed marshmallow man, a stay puffed marshmallow man, as one of my enemies. Sorry guys, you saw it here first on stream. Okay, so let's fix this. This is incorrect. And I don't quite know why. So this should be fine. Let's just try negating one of these. And see if... no, it's still wrong. So we have our footprint position. And I'm guessing our footprint position is off by a little bit. It's bizarre that they're off. But they are. Maybe instead of using the footprint geometry to get the center of this node, I should instead be using the shed blueprint model. That might be a good attempt at figuring out what's going on here. Okay, so we've only got one circle this time, because something is unhappy, but that looks... oh, okay. The problem is there was a line here, and that line broke down, but this is much better. So there was something wrong with our placement of the footprint node, and that was causing us to be offset by quite a bit, actually. So now that we've fixed it, let's remove this sphere addition stuff. And we're gonna do, I'm actually gonna take Whiteland's suggestion here, and not just check whether or not the cells are different, but we're gonna go another step, and we're gonna say if the elevations are different. So this gives us an ever so slight chance that if the elevations are similar, that it won't generate a big problem. And actually, let's not just say if they're exactly the same, let's go even further and say if the elevations, let's see here, if the absolute value of the difference between the elevations is less than, let's make this a small number just so it doesn't get too crazy on us, but we'll give it some leeway, is essentially what we're doing here. So we're saying the difference in elevations from the center to the corner can't be more than 0.001. So it gives us a little leeway without making it absolute, because the chances of absolute happening are so close to nil, I shouldn't even be bothering with something like this. But if we give it a little leeway, now this is something that can actually happen. So those plains lands, where the terrain is very similar from one cell to the next, you can see this line is pretty darn small, but we might still be able... okay, no, we gotta look for an even closer line. Let's see if one exists. Do you? No. How about you? No. Let's just double check I didn't break the base case. I did break the base case. Fantastic. if the difference in elevation is less than... Oh, no. Whoops. If the difference in elevation is greater than, then it's no longer valid. There we go. Okay. Test our base cases, right? Here is a cliff. Clearly doesn't work. Here's a less cliff. Still doesn't work. Alright, let's go for something that should work, right? Here is a single tile right here. Does work. And finally, we're going to test some edge cases here. Ha! Get it? Edge cases? No? Nah. Honestly, I should stop trying to make puns. When I say 0.001, that is in-game units. So a game unit, right now, I think a tree is about a half unit tall. So something like this cliff is a single unit tall. The game has a very, very set idea of what heights should and shouldn't look like. Now 0.001 looks to be a little too nitpicky, because it's not actually letting us do what we want to do. So let's actually drop it down to 0.01 and see if that nitpickiness is loose enough that we can still find ourselves an edge that we like. And I hope nobody's getting sick from all this. There we go. Oh, look at that. That's nice. So you can see we are crossing not just an edge, but that's not an insignificant edge. But it's so close in height that we honestly don't care. And we shouldn't, because we don't just want to limit you to staying within a single cell. We only want to limit the player when we totally have to. So a case like this, we want to limit, because this would look incredibly ugly and would cause problems with our AI. But lines like this, though... Oh, actually, that's a little larger than I thought, apparently. But some lines that are nice and small, we don't actually want the player to get limited there. And this is kind of a problem with, now we're not communicating to the player correctly when a shed is correctly being set, or when you can set down a shed, or when you shouldn't be able to set down a shed. So that's kind of our next step, right? We need to functionalize what we do, and then make this something that's a little easier to see. So yes, JoviX and Whiteland, it is a game world unit. So a game world unit is kind of it's somewhat arbitrary at the moment, but I've got some things set in place that will help me make use of it. For example, a tree is about a half unit, and I imagine a tree to be, you know, somewhere between 15 and 20 feet tall. So a half unit, we're saying that you can build something on a 5 to 10 foot difference in landscapes. And that's fine. That's not going to be something that's too terribly visible. Oh, sorry, Spaceman-Craft, I forgot to answer your question. He asks, where did I learn C++? I originally learned it from UC Santa Cruz, which is University of California, Santa Cruz, as part of a computer science and game design program. So not only did I learn computer science, I learned it in the purview of less theory crafting and more application crafting. Also, we learned a lot of different stuff in terms of some classes were a little more in-depth than their standard computer science counterparts. For example, instead of taking a computer architecture class where we dissected the various parts of a CPU and how it worked, we did the computer architecture class in the first half of the class. And keep in mind, I was on a quarter system, so this is a little insane. But then we proceeded to, for the rest of the quarter, dissect various consoles and look at the innards of those consoles and the hardware inside of them and see how the console was made, how its hardware architecture was made specifically for gaming. So we started all the way back at an Atari 2600. We opened that bad boy up, and he was actually using a projector and a laser pointer pointing out where inside the console each part was, and we went up through each generation until we were at the PS3, which was something that I had good experience using at that point because of multiple internships at Sony Computer Entertainment, but it was still really fun to learn that kind of extra detail that no other computer scientist was working through. I do have some water left, thank goodness. C# is a good starting point. Robx makes a good point. I would personally, and this is an opinion, not a fact, but I would personally recommend anyone wanting to learn programming either starts with Java, JavaScript, or C#, with C# kind of being my most recommended language to start with. I say that because C# has a memory manager built in the same way Java and JavaScript do, that C and C++ do not. And so that allows you in C and C++ to have a lot of complexity that is difficult to understand for starting computer science students. As you kind of learn C and C++, or as you learn other languages, coming over into C and C++ will not only be easier, but there will be less things that will make learning the language feel overwhelming. Java is also nice, but Java has some shortcomings that I really like C# better for. For example, doing lambda programming in C# is a little bit cleaner than it is in Java because it has more compiler errors and it has a better time detecting your intent as a programmer and then filling in blanks if you miss something. Alright, so let's see here. We've got the node not placing in a valid spot. I'm going to actually break that out into its own function. So we're going to create a function that just says check, or not even check, is valid footprint, right? Nice, simple. It's const, excuse me, is void. There we go. And I'm just going to break this out into its own stuff. And the reason I'm breaking this out into its own function is the following. Let's see here. We want just all of this. And then we just want to say is valid footprint. Actually, we don't even need that. We can just say is valid footprint here. We call the function inline. Great. And we just want this here. Oh, we do have to pass it a world pointer. Actually, we need to pass it a game world pointer. Actually, do we? That is a question we should ask. Do we actually need to pass it that? So what's the game world used for here? Okay, it is used in a valid place. So I kind of hate to do this, but I'm going to grab the world pointer completely separately here. Because I had some circular dependencies I'm kind of working around right now. So I need to keep my game world pointer usage kind of far away from the game tools header. Robx78 asks, do you need Java and C# for your job? I don't need Java. Java is not something we use at my office a ton. We use it in some spaces, but in most cases we want the kind of well-defined control that C and C++ give us. So in our case, we actually use a lot of C++. I do use C#, but I use it mainly for user interface applications that I write that are internal to the company. Also, if anyone, I don't know if anyone uses OnLive as a product, or I should say any of OnLive's products, but some of the user interface that you see if you use our product is built by me in C# using the Windows Presentation Foundation stuff. There we go. Is that everything? Okay, that looks like that's everything. So is valid footprint lives here. we call it here, that's fine. Now, for those wondering why in the heck I was actually doing that, while right now I don't have access to... Actually, you know what I can do? Haha, let's try this. If I have a valid footprint while I'm just waving my mouse around, we're just going to play with the visibility of this node. So if we have a valid footprint and the shed blueprint model is not enabled, then we are going to enable it. Otherwise, and actually I should only do this once. So, there we go. And so if we don't have a valid footprint and the shed blueprint model is enabled, then we need to disable the model. There we go. Look at that, nice and shiny. And that should actually make our work really easy. We should now be able to pretty much see one for one when we can and can't place the model. So look at that. You can see it kind of appearing and then disappearing whenever we have a bad placement. And this is a great way to tell the player when something is wrong. So note, here's one of these tiny edges, right? That normally you can actually construct something over. But then the moment you move over this hard edge on the south side of the screen, the model just disappears. Because that's just too much for it. That's not what we need at all. That's not a valid placement, therefore we don't want that on the screen. And this is great. This actually tells the player when the build option is actually available. And it tells us as programmers that we've done our job right, because you can see every location where we are returning essentially true for is valid footprint. So here you can see, oh, we hit that cliff, and we can clip into it a little bit, but it's not the end of the world. Same with going off this edge here. That edge just kind of disappears. So there's a few good places to put it up here on the mountaintop, but not if you try and cross any of these edges below. And so that's a good, we've got a good feature. We're done. I would call this a complete feature. And it is. I can't really think of anything more to add to this aside from getting that user-authored space set up. Which, honestly, because of the way it works right now, I'm not sure we need one. So Mo Hearthstone says, you could maybe paint the blueprint red when it can't be placed. It kind of looks weird when the model disappears. Unfortunately, painting the model red would mean changing a color inside of a shader. And I don't think I have access to that kind of shader parameter. I can look at it and make sure I don't have access to that. But I do want to make sure that it just works, and then we can kind of make it pretty later. It does look weird when it disappears, but I also want to make sure that it works before I start doing the pretty stuff. So let's see if we can actually access any of that. And I'm kind of worried that I won't be able to, because I don't know how to get the material, and as long as you can't get the material, you can't really get to the shader settings. Let's see here. I'm digging through IntelliSense to see what I have access to. I see lots of transforms, lots of node tree controls, manipulator stuff. I don't see any way of getting access to the material that it's made up of. That's unfortunate. And that's something I'm kind of learning how to do still, is manipulation of a model is kind of a difficult thing to do sometimes. It might even be something worth setting my, I guess resetting my forum account on the C4 engine forums and asking the creator of the engine how the heck I would go about doing such a thing. Because that is, it's something I've run into a few times now that I would like to be able to access. And I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I don't see any really good way to access that, unfortunately. Let's just very quickly look through the docs and make sure I'm not missing anything obvious. So let's see, we want the generic model class. And a generic model is made up of a model, which is a node, which I should be able to get stuff through that. Or one would think. Animations, root animators. Okay, so let's look at, I see node is a subclass, so we might be able to find something in node. Or maybe inside get object, maybe. I'm not really seeing anything though. Object, controller. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not really seeing anything in here that kind of fits what we need. Bardock asks, I've chosen computer architecture class for both semesters. The first is the starters and second is more advanced. Does it help with programming? Yes. Computer architecture is an interesting thing because the better a programming language and the better a programmer you are, the less you should have to work with computer hardware. Or at least the less you should have to write code that directly is influenced by the hardware you're working on. But, and I say that, you know, very, very loosely, because the more you do know about computer architecture and hardware, the easier it is for certain concepts in programming to kind of be easily understandable. For example, somebody who doesn't understand how a pointer works is probably going to have a hard time learning how a pointer works without a good understanding of how memory works, or how getting values with a CPU using memory pointers does work, right? It's one of those things where knowing directly how a pointer works or how a CPU works is not going to benefit you, but knowing how, say, the cache of a CPU works, or knowing how a CPU uses pointers for functions to jump between functions and return to their previous location and execution, knowing stuff like that is extremely beneficial as a programmer, because it still is showing you things beyond the basics that they won't directly influence your code, but you can write code around those concepts, and it helps you not only better understand how things work, it also allows you to write better code than somebody who has just simply learned how to program and has no idea what hardware details are. For example, somebody who doesn't know computer architecture won't understand why using a for loop like the following. So if I write for, let's say, int 32a equals 0, where a is less than 10, if I write a loop like this, oops, I used a and then I on the end. Great programming, Rob. Okay, so if I use this kind of for loop on a 32-bit machine, this is going to run faster on a 32-bit machine than it is on a 64-bit machine. Somebody who doesn't know the difference in bit architectures might look at this and go, it's the same loop, or it's the same for loop. Why would you have two different performances based on the same code? And it's because a 64-bit architecture is going to load this first 32 bits into a 64-bit register, and then it is going to proceed to OR it with another 32 bits that is a 0, and then it will go through that loop and proceed to do all the work. But each time it's doing this extra padding of the 32 bits here, and that's going to take some CPU time, regardless of what you're really doing with that for loop. You could just be doing this from, 0 to, let's say, 1,000,000. This is still going to run faster on a 32-bit machine than it is on a 64. Which is why sometimes you see the engine actually do this, where a machine is a number of bytes. It's an integer whose bytes match the bit length of the program you're compiling. So when I compile this in 32-bit mode, machine will be 32 bits. This will be nice and fast. If I compile this for a 64-bit machine, this will continue to run at the same speed because it's not doing this padding that I was explaining earlier. Yeah, also Bardock mentions cache time. There's all kinds of stuff you can get into with computer hardware that just knowing the architecture makes you a better programmer. It's just kind of an innate thing. I don't really know how to describe it much better than that. Hopefully I've done a good job. I think it's Ichi-Versi or Lychee-Versi? I don't quite know. I do like me some lychee, but that's on a frozen yogurt, not in a username. It says, hey Robert, do you have a link for more information on the project you're working on? I don't. My game design document is something that is still a complete mess, and I don't really want to post that complete mess. Not because I'm afraid someone's going to take my idea, but more because I'm afraid that it's just so ugly and messy that I really don't want to show something like that off. It's not a good example of what a game design document should look like, and it also is lacking, it's lacking a lot of the ideas that I have in my head currently, and it also lacks any kind of good formatting. So when I do publish a game design document, which hopefully will be soon, I want it to have a good format. I want it to match kind of what you see in the professional game design world, as opposed to, this is more just like a Google Doc right now with kind of shit piled into it, and it doesn't look that great. So soon there will be a link for more information on the project I'm working on. Unfortunately, in the meantime, the most information you'll be able to grab is the Trello link that is in my stream description, as well as any details that I kind of talk about during the game design process. Or if you guys want to ask things about the game, I'm more than happy to answer things to the best of my abilities right now. And, the game's going to evolve and change as I work on it. So it's not the end of the world if I put out a game design document and then completely veer off course. As long as the game is fun in the end, that's what matters. I really shouldn't capitalize every word. Move debug primitive creation from world generator to game utils. What else did we do? We added a plate primitive to the shed planning ghost. Once again, I keep capitalizing words for no reason. To the shed planning ghost for cell edge detection. Disabled the shed ghost when placing the shed would cause an error. There we go. And those don't seem like large things, but I mean, it took us, I think I started at about 11, I want to say, or maybe 11:30, so it's been about an hour and a half or 2 hours. So it's definitely, this hasn't been a small task. Granted, we started on a completely different task and then swapped over, so this is going to seem a little manic, especially when I link the two videos together, because the stream crashed at one point. I'm going to link them together and toss them up on YouTube. Let's see here. I am slowly starting to put the videos of various previous streams onto YouTube. Those who want to see what I've been working on before can check out the link to my YouTube channel, also in the stream description. I'll be putting every stream I do up there, so if you miss one, don't worry, I've got you guys covered. It might take me a little time. I've already fallen a little bit behind in simply uploading those straight to YouTube, but I will try and catch up and get those in place. I know you guys kind of like to see every step along the way, and it can be a little disjointed if you miss a stream, so that's a great way to keep up. If you're really curious about what I did, good place to go. Please also feel free to follow me if you like to, you know, watch game design work, see the creative processes, watch the gears clank and churn in my head. Sometimes a little smoke pours out the ears, and that's fine. I'm usually good at laughing off the more painful moments of staring at a screen and wondering, why, God, why does this code not work? Also, if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer things. I'm going to commit this code, and we'll crack open the planner. And you can see I've got a bunch of these things. I mean, one for my house, one for my car, various other games I've worked on in the past. I actually even have one for my D&D campaign, because I need to plan more of that. Mo, I know people keep sending me things to my messages inbox. I'm really bad about checking that, specifically because Twitch isn't telling me when I get emails in my Twitch inbox. So I'll check that at the end of the stream, and I'll be happy to reply then. Let's see here. So we wanted to ensure buildings can only be built completely within a cell. That is done. And notice this done list is getting pretty long. That's nice. It's always good to see the done list kind of taking on this longer quality than the rest of the to-do list. Of course, we're going to keep adding things to the to-do list as we shorten it, so it's not the end of the world that we're running low on things to do. We're never going to run low on things to do. This game is going to, right up until I run out of gameplay features, require a lot of continued work. So even if this starts to look small, it just means I have to do a little more planning and move things from the high-level task back over to this to-do list. So let's see here. So fix the woodcutting job. I've got it marked as blocked right now because I can't think of a really good way to add the woodcutting job back in without completely breaking how other stuff works. Because woodcutting would kind of overrun all the rest of the jobs that are currently getting generated. So I probably need to come up with and plan a good way for this woodcutting job to work. Because right now, the method I had in mind, as it turns out, doesn't exist. Or it does exist, but it's not exactly how I want it to work. So let's look at some gameplay stuff. Adding hunger to villagers is a good kind of gameplay thing. Making construction consume resources would also be good. The problem is that also kind of requires the woodcutting job, so I'm actually going to mark that as blocked for now, as much as I hate to. Let's see. Anything else I really think I want to chug on today? So at some point soon, and I say soon, whoop, hi Steam, don't mind me. Actually, let's drag this over away out of your guys' view. I've got a gaming group, and 2 out of the 3 of us are not online, so I'm not too worried about them wanting to play games at the moment. It's actually really difficult as a game designer between you make the choice of, do I want to consume content or do I want to create content? It is a very, very difficult task. Skill system and advancement would be really fun. I think that would be an interesting one to work on. Although, would that take a while? That might take a while. Kind of thinking about the size of some of these tasks, especially since in programming you learn very quickly that the size that the task looks is usually not the size the task actually is. Let's see. Let's look at this bug real quick. Rotating camera doesn't update the currently selected tool. I'm going to glance at the code for this very quickly. Make sure that this is... Uh-oh. I'm dropping frames suddenly. That's frightening. Come on, Twitch. You can do it. Oh well. So let's see. This track tool only gets called when the... currently when the mouse updates. What we need to do is also call track tool when you move the... when you move the camera as well. So key presses also need to change this this tool. So already we've got track selected tool, begin selected tool, all that good stuff. What we need to do is find a nice easy way to send a new track event when we move the camera. How do we do that? How do we do that? So somewhere in here we want to set that new track event. The question is, what's a good clean way to do this? Because if we just start calling handle mouse event from the handle keyboard event function, that's not going to be a good clean way to get this done. The problem is we also don't want to do, well, actually, it's not the end of the world if we do extra raycasts. That would make our system update more often. The problem is when you press a key and when you release a key would be the 2 times that that code would be updated. Not exactly what we want, because we want it to not just be updated when you press, but we also want it to be updated the entire time until you remove your finger off that key. Which is why I'm staring into space more than I usually do. I haven't really planned this. Kind of what I planned to get done on stream this morning is done, so we're now in kind of the twilight zone of what Rob wants to work on while I wait for my companions to essentially rejoin me on Steam. How? You mean who am I talking to? I'm talking to you guys. Who else? I mean, I guess I talk to myself all the time. I look at the camera. Hopefully, I make pretty good eye contact. I do talk to myself a lot, even when I'm not on stream. If I'm programming, I will talk to myself. My coworkers probably think I'm nuts, and that's fine. I am a little crazy. Where does this go? Where does this go? Because when I set the nav flags, that's not right. That's not going to be a valid setup. That's not going to tell me anything. Oh, come on. You guys can't tell me you don't talk to yourselves at all. Or maybe that is just... maybe I am crazy. Par for the course, I guess. I need to shave. It's that, like, uncomfortable, you're between 5 o'clock shadow and actual facial hair, so it's kind of stubby and sandpapery, that kind of point where you could hurt somebody if you're not careful. Ugh. See, these are the things I ponder while I code. I sit here and go, I need to shave. How? Okay, there's gotta be a good place for this. So right now, let's see here. I'm gonna... Where... Paint. Yeah, sure, paint. I guess paint.net's a little overkill for what I want. I was just gonna pull up, like, straight up paint. Oh, but I can't find it. I might have uninstalled it. I tend to turn off standard, like, MS Paint. Or maybe that's just what I should have done. Ah, no, I still have MS Paint. Lovely. Let's do some quick thinking here. So, brushes. Yeah, let's use this one. So I've got kind of the game world, right? Let's see if I can do this right. Yeah, there's a country. And, there's a country. And there's a little more country here, and some stuff here, and here. And then Europe's like here, right? Right, guys? This is how the world works. And then you can't see Australia because it's kind of down here-ish. Okay, so this is my game world, right? And so the game world is what's being queried by tools. So if I grab, let's see, what else do I have? I have a text tool. So I have kind of the game tool class. And that game tool class, let's see, also grab, so we have input, so this is specifically mouse input, right? Mouse input comes in, and it tells the game tool to update. The problem is, only when mouse input comes in do we ever update that game tool. And what we need really, instead of that, is we want something more regular, because this is only, let's see here, this is an on-input event. And we don't want just on-input events. We actually want something more like a per-frame function call happening, so that the game world is updating the game tool on a per frame. The problem is, if you look at this needs to then update something in the world, and we don't want circular updates like this. In fact, that's a terrible idea right there. So what I'm gonna do, actually I shouldn't be deleting that one. I should be removing something around here that's stopping my per frame setup, right? Because the game tool, no matter what, needs to modify things in the game world. That always stays. The question is, what can we do per frame that runs on this game tool and tells it to update? And we only need it to update on the following setups. We need to, here's our update situations. So we have mouse move, and we also need mouse clicks. So we need those. Those are the obvious ones. What we also need is we need to run this if the camera, right now it has navigation flags, and if those aren't 0, we also need to be updating. So those are kind of all our situations where the game tool needs to update. Yeah, Mo, I started with Africa and then went around it, and I'm not terribly good. Despite at one point being able to draw a pretty good, like, you know, Earth. Obviously my mouse painting skills have declined over the years. Oh, come on. Can't I just... Yeah, there we go. Select. Nope, not what I want. Select. Move. Good enough. There we go. That's a little clearer. So those are our 4 situations when we want to be updating our game tool. And the problem is we're doing the first 3 just fine, but we also need to do that 4th one. And the 4th one is difficult because in order to access the camera, you have to access the game world. But then we're creating more circular loops in our code, and that's not a pretty thing to be doing. Which is why I'm kind of stuck, as much as I hate to admit it. I'm going to answer some questions in chat while I think about this, because I see people talking. DJ Beats, does the code compile? Yes, the code compiles. I would be a terrible programmer if it does not compile. There we go, see? One succeeded. And if I wanted, I could actually rebuild the whole thing, but if one compiles, they all compile, right? That's how it works. Rosenbor7, hello, can I ask, why are you using pure C++ instead of Unreal or Unity? So I'm not just using pure C++, I am using a game engine. Unreal Engine is written in C++, and I assume parts of Unity are probably written in C++ as well. In fact, most of Unity I would expect to be in C++, simply because of the performance that that engine can pull out, and also how universal a lot of its stuff can be. Although I'm not 100% on that, so don't quote me. But why am I using C++? I'm using a C++ based game engine, and so that kind of pushes me to use C++ as a language for my work. I'm not using Unity specifically because it's graphical interface stuff. The last time I checked, which granted, that has probably changed between now and when I started the game, but last I checked, their graphical user interface stuff was still in like a beta state, and it was not meeting my needs. And this is a game engine that is high performance, multi-platform, and can still do what I need. And it has a great graphical user interface system that I adore. Plus, it's made for programmers, not designers. So this is a very powerful engine for someone like me to use. Especially since there's only 2 of us working on this game, I need something that is indie-friendly. And Unity is very indie-friendly, but so is this engine. So the C4 engine is kind of what I picked to make this game. I'm not using Unreal because Unreal has licensing things that I don't like. As much as I love Unreal, and I've worked with it repeatedly before, specifically on... I did ports of games in Unreal, including the Space Marine games, and also the... what was it? Duke Nukem Forever was Unreal Engine. Really old Unreal Engine, but Unreal Engine nonetheless. I'm trying to remember other Unreal games I've worked with. There's a lot of them. I haven't used the most up-to-date one, though. So I'm also... That's another thing, is I'm more familiar with this engine than Unreal. Let's see here. Despae asks, are you kind of talking about the model view controller? Yes. Yes, I am. I am actually very directly talking about that when I've got this stuff in place. I'm also kind of talking about code architecture in some ways as well. I want to make sure that my code does not generate circular dependencies in H files. Or I should say header files, to not abbreviate things unnecessarily. This engine does use a model view controller setup, so everything has to be controlled in that sense. So you have to really come into this game development with that in mind. Rosenbor also asks, I don't really think you can design something faster than Unreal Engine. Probably true. So you don't have to, I don't actually understand your question, Rosenbor. I'm really sorry. Your second one is kind of, I think there's either language barrier or I'm missing something obvious here. Essentially, the big thing is not performance I care about when it comes to Unreal Engine. The performance of Unreal is great. The performance of C4 is also really freaking good. It's designed very, very well, and a lot of its functions are actually mathematically proved because the author of this engine is a math PhD, so it's kind of his thing. Oh, okay, there's no question. Got it! Cool. Chokma asks, any opinion on CryEngine? My early opinion on CryEngine was that it was an unoptimized piece of crap. Specifically when the first couple CryEngine games came out, the fact that they would require such high computer specs kind of showed that they were going more for a pretty, a very pretty, very graphically intense engine, and weren't so worried about making a game on the engine, right? Because you can make engines with things in mind, and the thing in mind with CryEngine that they tend to always want to do is they want to push the technological barrier, but when you push a barrier like that, you also have to optimize your engine, otherwise standard computers can't run well, and that's kind of problematic. So that was my initial opinion of them. That's kind of changed over the years. Their optimization has improved. It's still, once again, they're still a technology firm and not a game engine firm. So CryEngine, in my opinion, is not exactly a terribly friendly engine for a lot of people. But they always come to GDC every year and they show off some very pretty stuff. So I'm not really one to complain. They do push several envelopes at the same time. Just the stuff they push is not, it's not exactly to my liking. I need, as an indie developer, to be able to make games in a reasonable amount of time. If I can't do that, something is wrong with the engine, or it just doesn't meet my needs. In CryEngine's case, it just doesn't meet my needs. DJ Beats asks, do you do the art for the game as well? What kind of game are you making? So I do the art currently. The terrible... I'll bring the art back up so you guys can see my lovely work. I do the art as well, yes. I do my own 3D modeling. You can see I make squares very well. I do very good squares. And actually some of my 3D art isn't complete garbage. You know, creating generators with power poles and... ooh, why are you not working? Interesting. There's a bug. Something I definitely need to fix. Oh, no, there it is. It's just... Huh. I need to look into that at some point in the future. I'm really, right now, not focusing on art a ton, which is why most of it is so ugly. I'm more than anything else trying to apply my skills to get gameplay running first, and once gameplay is working, then I'll dive into making the art a lot prettier. But you can see, like, this is the extent of my 3D art skills, for the most part, is basic vertex coloring. I can do a little UV texturing, but I'm not a huge fan of it. My music stopped. No! Okay, there we go. Music's going again. There we go. So, my 3D art skills aren't great. Like, the trees look okay, I guess. But I'm better at adding pretty things via game mechanics and also gameplay and also graphical features than I am with just pure, like, I can put a lot of pretty pixels on the screen. I can't. That's kind of my weak spot. The game is a RTS / survival simulator. The idea being take Banished and Stalker and kind of mash them together, where you're running a settlement or establishment with a certain number of people in it, and you're doing your best to not only enlarge your settlement, but also to survive all the things out there that are trying to kill you. So essentially, it's Banished with a lot more conflict. Whether that's social conflict between your villagers, or conflict with the environment, we'll get to that eventually. But one thing at a time, right? We're still adding things to our game as we go. Chakma asks, how did you do the terrain self-shadowing with modifiable terrain in a few words? Ah, a few words? I'll try and summarize it. Verneuil diagrams. Ta-da! Right? That's short. So the self-shadowing is... That's a shadow mapping system, which kind of deals with a lot of these self-shadowing problems that you run into in something like a like a stencil shadow system. Stencil shadow would look maybe a little bit cleaner, but you can't do self-shadowing stuff with stencils, at least not without great difficulty, which is why I like that this engine uses kind of multiple grades of shadow map to make things better. So that's kind of how I manage that. The engine mostly does most of the hard work for me in that respect. And Rosenborg, yeah, with Unreal I might be able to, but I'm also not familiar with Unreal in the same way that I am familiar with this engine, and so I'm much more easily able to add things to this engine than I would be with Unreal. I would actually be moving slower with Unreal, despite any possible changes or, you know, better things that might actually come with Unreal. Oh, I need housing. I want them to actually go into a house and sleep at night instead of collapsing on the ground. Also, why is there no data for their stats and stamina? That's not right. Let's fix that. That's a bug. Let's fix a bug that I just found, because I don't want to log the bug, I just want it to be gone. So somewhere in my input file, let's see here. If there is no tool selected, and you click, which is, I think, what this one is. Yeah, that looks about right. Let's put a breakpoint in here and figure out what is going wrong, because that should be working. So whoops. I don't think I did that right. Let's put that breakpoint back. I click on U. Let's see. We collided with some geometry that happens to be the cylinder. We get the super node of that cylinder. Excuse me. I've got that tickle in my throat that kind of tells you you're about to get sick, but I'm not sick yet. We'll see. Okay, so the parent node is the animated quad effect. Gosh, I really need to fix this so you guys can see my IntelliSense. That really kills me, because right now it looks like I'm just waving my mouse around on stream, and I kind of wish you guys could see what I'm looking at, because IntelliSense can be an incredibly useful tool, and the fact that you guys can't see it kind of kills me a little on the inside. Okay, so the parent node, yes, we've got the controller. The controller has a name and type. That's fine. Chakma, if you want to know how to do stuff like, I guess specifically like shadow mapping, so the term you want to literally look up is a shadow map. And if you Google that, you will find all kinds of articles on how it works. Essentially, the idea behind a shadow map is... It's difficult for me to explain because there's a lot to shadow mapping. But essentially, the big thing for shadow mapping is that you have an eye that is essentially checking for where light is and isn't colliding, and you're rendering that into a texture and then laying that texture or projecting that texture onto the world. It's kind of a difficult thing to do, but to explain, but shadow mapping is a great technique, very commonly used in a lot of games, and you can actually tell a lot of games use shadow mapping because the shadows are a little blurry on the edges, or sometimes if you see a hard pixel edge on a shadow, then you can tell shadow mapping is what's being used. Torpid Sloth, yes, I'm using OBS. I do want to swap to XSplit if OBS continues to be a pain in the butt. We'll see. I'm kind of curious what makes you ask if I'm using OBS, if like something's going wrong. Let's see here. I'm going to get this name wrong, but I'm going to try not to. Crixw, asks, why don't you use C++11 features? I do. That is what null pointer is. Null pointer is a C++11 feature. As are, let's see, I'm trying to think of other C++11 features I use. I don't use a ton of them right now. I'm still slowly learning my way into making regular use of things like lambdas and var. But I like the explicit declaration of a variable type so that I know what is held inside something. So I don't actually like using var except in obvious places, like for loops. I think var is a fantastic thing. Or in the case of like using iterators, var is fantastic for that too. For some of the others though, I don't quite like to use some of the other C++11 features quite so much. So, Chakma, for shadow mapping, it's actually a very real-time technique. You don't do any pre-processing, so to speak, of. There aren't pre-calculated shadow maps for us. There is simply an algorithm that goes through and says, when I shine these lights here, here, and here, it then goes through pixel by pixel on the camera's eye. So think of, here's your scene, and you have a light coming from this source, and you have an eyeball looking at it from a different direction, kind of like how we're viewing the world. The eye then has its own screen, which is a texture, and that texture says, for each pixel in this texture, how bright is the light hitting this pixel? And then it proceeds to go through every single pixel and record how much light is being received by that eyeball, and then overlays that back on the world. Kind of a summary into shadow mapping, a 10-second intro. Obviously, that's not a great explanation of how shadow maps work, but it is a existing one of how shadow maps work. Especially kind of for somebody who doesn't... I'd say go look it up. There's a lot of articles, as I said. Shadow mapping's been around probably for the better part of... probably almost a decade now. It's an old technique, technically. I wouldn't be surprised if it's been around for a decade. People have been trying to figure out better ways to get shadows down, but that's really, really common because it's a very powerful technique that is also very resilient to error. Any time that you would think a shadow map might break, turns out it does a pretty darn good job of hanging in there. Yes, I think this is FDL music at the moment, Despair. Yes, Cosmos, it's the battle music. Right now I'm just kind of cycling through all the game music I happen to own on loop. Because it's nice. Game music is kind of, it's focusing without being distracting. And yes, Chakmal, var is kind of the same as auto. You essentially are just kind of saying, I'm not going to declare what is inside this variable. I am going to let the compiler figure it out based on the first thing stored into this variable. So if I say var I equals 5, it's going to intuitively know that since it's just 5 and not 5.0f or 5.0, it's going to know it's an integer. Versus if I say 5.0 without an f, then it knows it's a double, or if you include the f, okay, it's a floating point. I find it makes your code a little unclear, so I don't like using it. Obviously, that's personal opinion more than anything else, but I like a code style for myself at the bare minimum that is intuitive and easily readable. You'll find my code includes a lot of white space, and that I have very long variable names that are very verbose, because I like to be able to just look at the code and know what it does instead of having to go in and add extra commenting afterwards. var does not work with templated type. Well, actually, you know what? It might. It really depends. var is an interesting new feature. And the big thing about var is that it can detect what's coming in. So it might not do what you expect it to do, which is another reason why I like doing very explicit variable declarations. When I say a C4 collision data object, I know it is making that struct. Versus if I say var right here, or auto, I guess auto is the... I should say auto, because that's the actual C++ 11 term. Then I'm not really sure what's going into this, right? When I do something like that, I don't know. But if I type, oh, collision data, I know exactly what is going to be inside this variable type. Oh, no, I don't want to stop debugging. I was in the middle of doing something. Let's finish that. So, okay, the parent node looks good. The parent controller looks good as well. And actually, I'm going to try what Torpid Sloth is saying here. We're going to actually swap from window capture to a monitor capture. So you guys will see all of my little icons. Let's see here. Window capture. Not window capture, sorry, I apologize. Not window, we want monitor capture. And we want, I think we want the first monitor. Capture layered windows. Sure. Let's try it. Okay, wrong monitor, firstly. There we go. Now you can see the whole thing. And let's turn off the code capture for a moment. Let's see if you can see the IntelliSense here now. I'm still not seeing IntelliSense on the monitor capture either. I'm guessing it's some kind of overlay that lives somewhere in like DirectX land or something that is not allowing you guys to see it. Because right now I'm seeing the IntelliSense. I'm moving my mouse over it. But I'm not seeing anything on your end that is showing off the same variables. But thanks for the tip. I need to poke at this more. Let's bring the code capture back, take out the monitor capture, because that's unhelpful. There we go. And our current task is actually just kind of bug fixing. Bug fixing and Q&A. Because I do enjoy answering your questions. It is bizarre. I'll work on that more in the future. We'll see if we can't get IntelliSense in for you guys. Alright, so we know it's a villager. Our controller is full of garbage data. Oh, because it hasn't been set yet. And now that it's been set, it has valid data. I see all of its stats. Interesting. So here we are creating the stats window, and then we set the window title, and we add the widget to the world, but we're not actually setting that villager controller anywhere, which kind of explains why I'm not seeing the data. And the funny thing is, I know I did this somewhere. I know I wrote this code to actually fill this in. It's probably in my interface code, set stats, villager window node. Okay, so I must have written the function and then proceeded to never fill in that function. And let's just double check. Yeah, interface.h is included at the top. And I need, let's see here. Does anyone call this function? No, nobody does. And there's a darn good reason. It's probably because it doesn't exist in the H file. Okay, so this function here needs to find its way into here. That's all. So this is, and this is an interesting case for those who have never seen me do this before. I'm creating a function that exists in the in a namespace that doesn't have a name. It's kind of like the Twilight Zone for code. It exists, you can call it from anywhere that includes it, and it's kind of frightening to do stuff like this because nobody owns this code. Nobody owns the actual element that this code is going to work inside. At the same time, it's really good for creating helper functions, which is what I'm using it for right now. In fact, I'm going to put a space here, because that's not really related to this one. So let's call that, let's see, we were inside our input function. We have our stats window, and we have the, let's see, the parent node. We're going to go into our character, and then get target node. There we go. So this should set all of the stats inside of the, and that compiled, so this should be fixed. Let's try this. I click, it crashes. Great. Welcome to the wild world of programming, where Rob writes code and then shit breaks. DJ Beats asks, how long have you been working on this? I think I checked, and my first commit to a server, a code repository, was back in November, I think. So that means I've been at this for 2.5 months. Granted, this is a side thing. Like, I spend a couple hours on it, you know, every couple of days. So it's not like this is an 8-hour job for me that I've been doing. This is something I work on from time to time. So why does this break? Well, it probably has something to do with this function that I just put in. So let's drop a breakpoint there and just click on people until, there we go, till it works. So what is wrong? We step inside this function, then we step inside this template function. Okay, so the problem is we're not finding widgets for this window yet. So it's likely an issue that results from not actually having added this widget to the interface manager yet. And we'll double check that in a second. We'll kind of double check our hunch to make sure that, yeah, there's our problem. There aren't any elements initialized because this hasn't been created yet. So let's create it first. Let's make sure our order of operations here is correct. And then we'll try it again. Chakma asks, do you do regular memory leak checks? No. I should. I don't. Every once in a while, I'll break out the heap and say, okay, here's who is using my current amount of memory, which is kind of nice to know, right? Here's all the information of who is using memory, so the memory manager is obviously hanging on to almost everything. And then processes are essentially scripts that I've written in the engine, so they're using a little. My input device has a little bit. Most of it is actually shader data, and bonds are part of the visibility system that the engine uses. And you can see cameras and lights use up a little bit, but that's about it, right? You can see there's a ton of zeros in here. And if I unload the world, the hope is if I call heap again. So here's a leak right here. This shader data probably should be gone. It looks like almost everything else is zeroing out correctly, though. I'm not really seeing this input device. Might be something else that's also left over. If we really want to check, actually the proper way to do this is do a heap call first, look at what exists, and then say, okay, if I load a world and unload a world, do I keep this, and I'm going to write this number down, if I can find, there's a pen. I'm going to write this number down, this 693536, right? That's how much system memory is currently left, or available to us as a game. So I'm going to load a world, and then I'm going to immediately unload it, and we'll call heap again. And actually, we don't have any memory leaks, as it turns out. You can see, here's our old value, and here's our new one, and it hasn't changed. So we actually aren't leaking any memory right now, which is fantastic. I don't do this regularly enough, but every once in a while I go back through and look and go, oh god, why am I losing like, 10 megabytes here and 16 here? Yeah. Every once in a while I do it. Not a ton. Alright, so actually let's, what was I in the middle of? Right, I was in the middle of figuring out why things were crashing and making sure that they worked. So I click on you. Ah, and there it goes. There we go. Okay. Or at least most of it. His stamina should not be empty. That bar, this one right here, should not be completely empty. Otherwise, he should be asleep. And these guys, these 4 dudes on a mountain, are definitely not asleep. So let's figure out... Whoops. Don't mind the bug. I actually know about that one. I've got it marked and everything. What is going wrong here? Let's put a breakpoint and find out. So I click on this bugger. We step inside. So these 3 work. That's fine. So we're going to set this other mutator node. We're going to find a widget by the name of stamina bar, which does exist. And let's just look at the interface real quick for this. So stamina bar. Where are you, stamina bar? Here it is. So it has a set villager node function. Is that set villager node? Okay, that looks fine. So we're going to go through. Here's our problem. So it's looking for a very specific mutator type, and the current mutator is a stamina bar type, but it's looking for a villager stat type instead. That's not good. In fact, what we need to do... How do we do this? How do we get clever? We need to be smart about this, because we can do this in a couple lines of code if we do this correctly. Question is, how are we clever? Well, I guess the easiest thing to do... Let's go with easy first, right? Whenever you're in an interview and they ask you how to do something, start talking right away. It's a really good way to get a job. You just talk. Usually you give the first answer that comes to mind. So you say, I want this to do this. So in this case, I'm just going to add another thing to our if statement here. That's actually fine. In the case of an interview, if you were at a job interview and you gave this answer and you think about it and you kind of go, but this is a, like, performance-wise, a slow way to do this, or this is an kind of an unoptimized bit of code I just wrote. That is when you kind of explain, but I know better ways to do it, and then you keep talking. And as long as you keep talking, that interviewer will have a really good idea of what you're thinking, and they will follow along with you a lot better than other interviewees that just sit there and kind of stare at the wall for a while and go, you do this. And then they don't say why or how they came to that answer, right? They love it when you actually come up with the answer in front. Alright, so this actually should work. Ta-da! Just one little bit. One extra, I call that one line of code, pretty much. Because that's what it is. Let's make sure this doesn't crash. I'm going to remove the... There we go. That looks like that worked. So I removed the breakpoint anyway, just because I'm overconfident. And here you can see, there's our stamina bar. That sucker works. Yeah, bug fixed. Bug completely demolished. I got it with the swatter. Cool. Sorry, cracking things. Probably, oh, you can hear those in the mic too, can you? Nope. Oh, there's a good one. Anyway. Alright, so, I guess I need to submit that bug fix to the code. Otherwise, and yes, same bug, I know about it. I need to fix that. Hello, MS Paint. I know you guys can't really see that unless I drag it up in front. My good old MS Paint. I need to keep thinking about this. This is something that kind of comes with the planning that I do before stream usually. What you're seeing right now is me kind of do things on the fly, so it's not the cleanest stream I've ever done. It's not the end of the world either. But it's still nice to have some idea of what I'm doing before I dive in. It has been several hours since I started this stream, so I think I'm going to call it for now. I may come back later tonight after I'm done with my Borderlands shenanigans and after I've planned a little bit more of what I'm hoping to do, because I'm kind of venturing far enough into unknown land at this point that I want to make sure I'm really comfortable with what I'm going to be coding next on stream. I like to do things cleanly, and if I sit here and try and do stuff on the fly, I may come up with a working solution, but I won't come up with the best working solution. And that just wastes time when I have to go back and fix it later, either off stream or do another stream and fix it then. We're wasting time and we're losing efficiency, and we don't want that. Good to stretch. Don't forget, if you're sitting at your desk, do a stretch every once in a while. Just kind of move about. Don't let yourself turn into a blob. I try not to. I run with my dog. Good exercise. Those who know about geocaches, we hunt those down in our free time. Alright, you can't see what I'm typing. Let's bring that up for you guys. So it's just simple, just fixes a bug within the interface code for the villager stat window. Yeah, cool. And that is, woo, 98. We're almost up on the 100th version iteration. Granted, that doesn't mean a ton. I could write a character, commit it to the code, and it would, you know, increment that number by 1, but it's always interesting to have milestones when you hit that 100th commit. It's just kind of an exciting thing. Let's see. People are talking in chat. I should probably keep up with that. Folks talking about your own games. It's great to see you guys are making games. If you want to toss links in chat to your own game, the only thing I ask is you don't kind of go hog wild with advertising for your own game. Put in links. Please enjoy yourselves here. Just don't take over all of chat with those things. Still, it would be great to see what you guys are working on. And I'm glad you guys are kind of enjoying what I'm working on as well. Torpid Sloth looks like he has. Ooh, do you have more things that I can try? Monitor capture should work. Okay. They said IntelliSense is probably a transparent window. Let's play with this for a moment longer. I just really want to get this working somewhere for you guys so you can see my IntelliSense windows. So we're going to click on a guy, hit a breakpoint, and my IntelliSense shows up and that doesn't. So let's add a new monitor capture for monitor number 2, and we're going to try capturing maybe layered windows. Let's see if that works. So that's going to make my picture disappear for a moment, and that's fine. Ah, there's my IntelliSense. Oh, fantastic. Oh, that's what I was looking for. Alright. So, this is what you guys have been missing out. This lovely, lovely stuff. So, just to show you guys what I was debugging before. First, we check. We see the window is valid. You can see there's a valid pointer right here. Here's our widget key, that body stat text. Whoop, there it is. And when we step past that line of code, we can see it returns a valid pointer for us. Now we're going to for loop through every mutator attached to this text. And thank you very much, Torpid Sloth, for helping me fix this and figure this out. This is definitely something that was more than a little painful. In fact, I'm going to take my code capture and remove that old school window. And I'm going to take this and move it down. Nope, let's move it down once more. There we go, I'm back. Hey. And, more specifically, you can see my stuff. So you can see the mutator iterator right here. As I crack this sucker open, here's the type. And here's the type I was trying to match is here. which you can see how those this 4 characters actually evaluates to, oh gosh, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's 1,937,007,204 is what K-stat body lines up for. It's really cool and a really easy way to generate stat enumerators, or I shouldn't say stat, I should say enumerators that are identifiers. So you don't want them to be a simple integer between 0 and blank. You want them to be uniquely identified and difficult to collide with. That's what this is kind of for. Cool. I actually might leave the taskbar. Whatever. I can muck with the taskbar later. I'll do that off stream, so I don't bore you guys with the stuff I'm doing. But yeah, so this is where you were able to kind of see my stuff, and now that you can see my IntelliSense, yeah. And hopefully this is recording. So yeah, it is. It's still recording. Cool. So anyone joining me on YouTube later who isn't viewing this now, but viewing this in the future, cool. You'll be able to see this in more of my debugging stuff in future streams. Thanks again, Torpid Sloth. I cannot thank you enough for helping me figure that one out. I spent some time poking at it, but just couldn't figure it out myself. But it looks like we are set. Any more questions? I see there's a lot of stuff going on in chat. I'm glad you guys are having fun chatting with each other. I heard that singleton classes are bad. Do you agree? Actually, so, like many things, it is a tool of which you want to use at the right time. So, for example, there are a lot of singleton classes in this game engine. They're not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, singletons can be a great tool. But like any tool, you want to make sure you don't abuse it, and singletons are especially easy to abuse. So I would say be careful when you use them if you do end up creating singletons. Creating a singleton class that you can subclass off of is really the way I would go, because it lends you more control and it keeps your singletons from kind of going crazy and out of control themselves. So I would be very careful when using singletons, but like any type of tool, you just got to use it in the right place. Obviously, if, singletons are a hammer and the situation you're looking at is a screw, don't hammer, just don't. Just don't. Use the tool for the job. Otherwise, if it doesn't fit, look at there are a lot of other code techniques that work a lot better than singletons in a lot of cases. Look up decorator patterns, look up, I'm trying to think of other common code patterns, but I'm sure if you just look up like code architecture patterns, you'll find what you need. Singleton is the easiest to use and abuse, and that's the only reason that so many people say it's bad, is that you get to a point where a lot of beginners will abuse singletons to the point of creating almost impossible to maintain code. So you avoid it when you can, and you use it when you should. Otherwise, it's fine. I don't know if I have any more questions in chat, or if I think I'm gonna take a break for a while, guys. I'm having a lot of fun. Oh, I see another question, actually. Chakma asks, are you familiar with having lots of externals in your code? If yes, how do you avoid that in general? So all of the singletons, surprise, surprise, this links to the previous question, all the singletons I'm using are externals, because my game lives inside of a DLL. So it is inside its own contained bit of code, and the game is the actual executable that is calling into my DLL and running my code. In my case, I need certain externals so that the game executable can access the memory that is set to my game code. For example, here, I'll pull up an actual use case of an external. Here's one. So the alert window, right? This is both a singleton and I've got my external variable here. This is so that any piece of my code can grab the singleton class, which ensures that only one version of this class is ever instantiated, and it makes it available via this variable, so that if anything needs to publish to this alert window, and the alert window will eventually be something like, you know, people have died, or somebody just came back to town, or your town is under attack. That is something that a bunch of different modules will need access to. And so because so many things need to be able to dive into this alert window and access it, that is a good time to make it external. You want to avoid using externals everywhere. Externals do make your code very messy, and you have to clean up every single external before you exit, because these are things that are very easy to leave what's called a dangling pointer inside of. It's a pointer to memory that first you allocate it, so your memory is set and ready to go, and then when you delete it, you still have a pointer that points to where the memory used to be. But now it's filled with garbage data, and if you try and access it again, your game will crash. So you want to be very careful with externals. Once again, kind of the same as singletons. You want to avoid overusing and abusing them. They're a great tool. Just be very careful with them. Oh gosh, once again, more names I'm bad with. Wishireni? Wishireni? I think that's right. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your username. Asks, how long did it take for you to get fluent in game programming? To get good at it, it took me a long time. I have been making games for 6 years now. It took me a few months to make my first game. It took me a lot longer to do what I would call becoming fluent in game programming, because while I could make games, I could not make anything too terribly complex, which was fine. It was just a learning step. It takes you a while to learn each step as you work your way through. Initially, I used to only make 2D games. The 3D math was beyond me, and I didn't want to learn all the ins and outs of how to put vertices on the screen that weren't flat. And so, for the longest time, I used to make 2D games that were very, very simple. It took me probably the better part of a year to a year and a half to get to the point where I felt comfortable writing code in a 3D system. Because remember, even when you're working in 2D, you're still working in 3D, it's just kind of flattened. So I would say in total maybe a year and a half. You can make games in the meantime. You don't have to sit here and study for a year and a half and then start making games. I would say make games. Make lots. Code as much as you can endure, or as much as you want to, and when you are done, just as long as you're still enjoying it, keep coding, and you will get better at programming and game programming, to the point of being able to do something as complex as maybe what I'm working on. You know, this is kind of the culmination of a lot of my skills. So, and I'm still learning too. Each time I make use of this engine, I'm still formulating things that I've been missing in the past. So, programming is always a learning process. There just kind of comes a point where you feel comfortable enough that you can make a big game like this. Cool. So, and for those who are wondering, I actually don't know what the line count is for this engine, but it's monstrous. This is a monstrous engine alone. Plus, all these files here on the left are my game code, not the engine. The engine is its own folders and folders of code. Granted, it's well written, so I love it. Whew. Alright guys, my voice is starting to get scratchy on me, and I anticipate Although I'm not sure if it's actually the case. Oh, one of my buddies is back online. Hopefully the other will come online soon, and we can Borderlands. But in the meantime, thanks again for joining me, guys. If this is your first time and you're wondering what the heck I'm doing, this is kind of the end of a stream where I make an RTS and survival simulator, mostly without micromanagement. I just kind of want big macro management levels and for the AI to do the rest. So there are definitely a lot of hurdles, a lot of gameplay left for me to make and work on. But if this is your first time and you're enjoying what I'm doing, please feel free, follow me. I will probably be on either later tonight or definitely I will be on tomorrow to do more game programming. We're getting to the point where I need another big gameplay feature, so that will be coming up soon, and I would, be more than happy to have all you guys along for that. I'm also recording this, so if you want to see previous streams, I'm slowly catching up to where I should be with streams. I honestly need to start uploading the next one to YouTube, since the last one finished recently. It's crazy how you can have 100 megabit per second downstream and only like 10 up. It boggles my mind, but whatever. That's Comcast for you. I'll be sticking around in chat for a little bit longer. I know some folks sent me some messages over Twitch and I haven't answered them. I'll either answer them in chat if I can, or I'll just send a message in return. But thanks, guys. Again, follow me if you like watching this kind of low-level code and dissection of game design. I'm more than happy to also answer questions if you guys have any. But otherwise, thanks for sticking around, and hopefully I'll see you guys on the next stream. Take care!